Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet exploration of the distant past. As you settle in, let your mind drift softly, like a leaf on a slow-moving river, carried gently through time and space. Together, we will wander through the intricate, vast, and layered world of medieval China, a civilization rich in art, philosophy, and invention, but also deeply marked by hardship, hierarchy, and labor that wore the spirit thin. Tonight, our journey will begin with the heavy footsteps of the peasant farmer. For while the grandeur of Chinese dynasties often dazzles with tales of emperors and scholars, the reality for most was one of unyielding toil and precarious survival. Afterward, we'll gently ascend from the muddy fields to the shaded halls of history, where we all meet Zhu Yuanzhang, a peasant-turned-emperor whose life was as turbulent as the dynasties he shaped. From there, we'll traverse the silent corridors of archaeological discovery, exploring the intricate secrets of China's ancient canals and the engineering that tied the empire together. Finally, we'll find ourselves in the rarefied air of an imperial palace, where silk-robed elites feasted beneath golden beams, worlds away from the farmers who sustain them. But for now, breathe deeply. Imagine yourself in the fields of medieval China, where life was as steady as the turning of the seasons, and just as unforgiving. Imagine waking before the first streaks of pale dawn brush the sky, the air damp and cool against your skin. You live in a simple mud-brick dwelling, its earthen walls cracked and dry, the roof thatched with straw. Perhaps a faint breeze stirs the dry dust beneath your sleeping mat, but there is no time to linger. The day begins with the rhythm of obligation. You are a peasant, born into a cycle as old as memory. The village around you is modest, a scatter of huts and lintus clinging together near the rice paddies and wheat fields. Paths of packed dirt thread between homes, and a narrow irrigation canal snakes along the periphery, its water sluggish and brown, but essential. The land you work does not belong to you. Instead, it is owned by a landlord, an absentee figure, who might live far away in some manor or town. Yet their presence is constant, felt in the taxes you owe in grain, in labor, or in silver, when it can be scraped together. And above them, the emperor himself, distant, divine, unreachable, yet ever present in the form of officials who arrive to collect. Your day is defined by physical strain. The warmer seasons, rice planting is backbreaking. You wade calf-deep in muddy, waterlogged fields, pushing seedlings into the soft earth. The water carries leeches, mosquitoes, and the ever-present stench of rot. Sunlight reflects off the standing water, burning the back of your neck, turning skin to leather over time. Your hands are cracked, nails perpetually clogged with grime. In autumn, the wheat harvest brings no relief. Stooped labor with a sickle, hauling bundles on aching shoulders. The cycle of planting, weeding, irrigating, harvesting, it repeats without mercy, the pulse of the village's life. And yet, nature is fickle. Droughts parch the fields, floods wash away entire seasons of work, and locusts can descend in clouds that block the sun, reducing months of labor to nothing in a matter of hours. With each disaster, the burden of taxes remains, unchanging, unsympathetic. Meals are plain and repetitive. If you are fortunate, there is rice, a luxury for many. More often, millet porridge, rough wheat cakes, or boiled vegetables flavored with salt or fermented bean paste. Protein is scarce. A few fish, if you are near a river, or a sliver of pork on rare occasions. Hunger is a familiar sensation, sometimes gentle, sometimes gnawing. Then there is the constant threat of being conscripted. Soldiers may come, gathering men for distant campaigns, leaving families without their strongest members for months or years. Disease, too, waits quietly, a persistent shadow. In cramped villages with limited sanitation, illnesses spread easily, cutting lives short before old age can claim them. Family ties offer what solace they can. Extended household is common. Grandparents, parents, children, and cousins living together, supporting one another through the toil. The village is a web of relationships, mutual dependence built on necessity. Festivals and rituals, paying homage to ancestors, offer brief reprieves. Perhaps during the spring festival, you might catch a glimpse of colored lanterns or hear the beat of a drum. Yet even in celebration, the knowledge persists. The fields remain, waiting, indifferent. You sleep on a mat of straw, exhausted. The night brings little comfort, the air thick in summer or brittle with winter chill, fires weak and flickering. Your dreams, if any, come, or perhaps of better harvests, or of relief that rarely arrives. This was the rhythm of life for the peasant in medieval China, a rhythm of endurance, of submission to the land, the lords, and the skies above. But sometimes, from these muddy fields, history surprises us. Sometimes a single life rises beyond the village, beyond the soil, and alters the course of empires. And so, let us now drift forward. From the anonymous masses of the peasantry to one man who began his life in the dirt, yet ended it wearing a crown. Now, dear listener, as we leave behind the quiet toil of the ordinary peasant, let us step onto the path of an extraordinary life. A life that, like a river breaking through its banks, surged beyond the expectations of birth and destiny. This is the story of Zhu Yuanzhang, a man born into dust and labor, who would ascend to the dragon throne as the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty. Picture a small village in the fertile plains of Anhui province, in the early 14th century. Here Zhu Yuanzhang was born to a family of peasants, tenant farmers bound to the land, their lives marked by poverty, droughts, and hardship. The family was large, but their resources meager. The land yielded little, and hunger was a familiar guest at their table. Then, when Zhu was still a child, famine swept the region, a withering disaster that snuffed out lives like candles before a sudden wind. His banners flapping against the wind, his army moving with purpose through fields and towns that once resembled his own birthplace. When both his parents succumbed to the famine, Zhu was left orphaned, adrift in a collapsing world. He cultivated alliances with scholars, Confucian officials, and local gentry. His army grew disciplined, not merely a rabble of rebels, but an organized force. His reign, while effective, was marked by suspicion, purges, and harsh punishments. He feared conspiracies, and many officials met grim ends under his watch. One can imagine that the insecurities of his impoverished youth never fully released their grip, manifesting in an iron-handed rule. His was a life that defied the crushing gravity of circumstance, but always carried its weight, and instead descend into the earth itself, where secrets of ancient China lie, preserved in the stones and channels of forgotten waterways. He implemented sweeping reforms, reorganizing the land, reinvigorating the Confucian bureaucracy, and seeking to stabilize agriculture, the very backbone of the empire. Still whispering stories of the laborers and artisans who shaped them, by positioning himself not just as a warlord, but as a restorer of Han Chinese rule, Zhu won popular support. Slowly, methodically, he ascended the ranks, earning the loyalty of soldiers and commanders alike. From the muddy fields of Anhui to the grand halls of the Forbidden City, Zhu Yuanzhang's journey was one of staggering ascent. With this victory, he declared himself emperor, adopting the reign title Hongwu, meaning vastly martial. In his decrees, he often reminded officials of the importance of agriculture and the common people, perhaps remembering the ache of hunger that had shaped his earliest days. Thus the Ming Dynasty was born, its name meaning bright, a beacon after the so-called darkness of foreign rule. His literacy, his discipline, his understanding of both the common folk and the necessities of war all set him apart. Alone, he sought refuge at a local Buddhist monastery. Here, in the shelter of crumbling walls and the scent of incense, he learned to read and write, skills that would later become rare assets for a peasant-born man. But stability was fleeting. The monastery itself struggled with limited resources, and soon Zhu found himself cast out once again, forced to wander. These were turbulent times. The Yuan dynasty, ruled by Mongol emperors, was weakening under the weight of corruption, rebellion, and discontent among the Han Chinese majority. The countryside was restless, stirred by secret societies and whispers of revolution. In time, Zhu joined one such movement, the Red Turbans, a millenarian Buddhist sect that promised to overturn the corrupt Yuan rulers and restore the world to moral order. As a young man, Zhu drifted as a beggar, moving from village to village. Here Zhu's life began its astonishing transformation. Among the Red Turbans, he displayed a keen mind for strategy and leadership. Imagine him now, no longer a ragged orphan, but a general commanding thousands. Yet Zhu was cautious. He understood that brute strength alone could not secure lasting power. In 1368, after years of campaigning, he seized the Yuan capital, Kambalik, known today as Beijing. As Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang ruled with the vigilance of a man who had known hunger and peril, yet the scars of his upbringing never truly faded. Still, under his leadership, the Ming Dynasty stabilized, flourished, and would endure for nearly 3 centuries. And yet, the peasant emperor could never entirely forget the land. The soil beneath his feet, the back-breaking work of the farmer, the rhythms of the seasons. As we let Zhu Yuanzhang fade into the historical tapestry, we might reflect on the fragile boundary between obscurity and power, between dust and throne. Now, dear listeners, we continue our journey. Let us leave the grandeur of palaces and campaigns. Let us explore gently the mysteries unearthed by archaeologists, particularly the engineering marvels that allowed medieval China to thrive. Its canals, dikes, and locks. Let your mind drift now, dear listener, as we leave behind the courts and campaigns of emperors and step instead into a quieter, but no less impressive, domain. The waterways of ancient and medieval China. Imagine, if you will, standing on the muddy banks of a wide man-made river. A canal, cut by the hands of thousands, stretching far beyond what the eye can see. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and slow-moving water. Completed and expanded in stages over centuries, but reaching its medieval peak during the Sui, Temps, and Song dynasties. Workers dug and dredged by hand, their spades cutting into stubborn earth, sometimes with the help of primitive but effective tools, wooden scoops, stone picks, and baskets passed from hand to hand. The labor was backbreaking, often performed by conscripted peasants, criminals, or soldiers pressed into service. Prior to this, boats struggled to ascend and descend varying heights in the canal system, often damaged or delayed. These embankments had to be constantly maintained, as the rivers that fed the canal brought silt and sediment that could easily choke the channels. Laborers patrolled the banks, patching breaches with bundles of reeds, mud, and stone. A never-ending task akin to holding back the relentless press of nature itself. The pound lock allowed vessels to be raised or lowered between stretches of water at different levels, a technique centuries ahead of its European counterparts. Without it, feeding the hungry populations of cities like Kaifeng and later Beijing would have been nearly impossible.
Oh.
But many of its ancient stretches are now dry or forgotten, bypassed by modern infrastructure. The splash of water against timber and the steady pulse of a civilization keeping itself alive through innovation and relentless labor. Towns that once thrived have become sleepy backwaters, their names scarcely remembered. For our next journey, we'll take us into the grand palaces of the Song Dynasty, where emperors presided over a realm steeped in ceremony, art, and the pursuit of scholarly refinement. Barges creak as they are pulled along the current, their wooden hulls groaning under cargoes of rice, silk, ceramics, and salt. In the sediment layers, traces of pollen and plant life reveal how the environment adapted and changed alongside these human-made channels. These settlements buzzed with the noise of porters unloading bales of silk or sacks of grain, the calls of merchants haggling over prices, and the splash of oars dipping into the water. Without the canals, the economic and cultural vibrancy of medieval China would have withered. The surface of the canal is a mirror, reflecting the gray sky and the rhythmic movement of laborers guiding their boats. You are standing along the Grand Canal, the longest and oldest artificial river in the world, a staggering feat of engineering connecting northern and southern China. This artery of commerce and governance ran for nearly 1,100 miles, linking the fertile rice fields of the south to the political centers of the north. Constructing such a monumental waterway was no simple task. Imagine the scene: long lines of men stripped to the waist, muscles taut, sweat mixing with the mud that caked their skin. The sun above or the drizzle of persistent rain made little difference. The work continued regardless of the weather. The engineers of the time displayed a sophisticated understanding of hydraulics and terrain.
Oh.
They designed intricate systems of locks and weirs, mechanisms that allowed boats to navigate different water levels without being dashed against fast currents or shallow beds. Yet, despite this grim toil, the results were nothing short of extraordinary. One of the great innovations was the invention of the pound lock, attributed to the Song Dynasty engineer Qia Weiyu in the 10th century. Consider also the dikes and levees that lined the canal, preventing floods from engulfing nearby farmlands. Along the canal stood bustling towns and way stations, where inns, warehouses, and markets sprang up to cater to the constant flow of goods and people. It is easy to forget that behind every artifact we now unearth, every shard of porcelain, every ink-brushed contract, there was a dense network of transportation that made such prosperity possible. Archaeologists have unearthed remnants of these marvels, ancient stone lock gates, fragments of boat hulls, and even tools left behind by the workers themselves. Yet there is a subtle melancholy to these findings. The Grand Canal still exists, of course. Still, when we gaze upon a weathered stone lock or a crumbling embankment, we can almost hear the echoes of the workers' chants. The canals were more than just waterways. They were lifelines, threading together the disparate regions of a vast empire. And now, as we leave the quiet flow of these channels behind, let us ascend from the earthy mud of the waterways to the rarefied air of the imperial court. There, amid lacquered screens, embroidered robes, and the soft glow of lantern light, we will witness the lives of those far removed from the toil of fields and canals, and yet whose fates were intertwined with them. Let us now enter the palatial halls of the Tang Dynasty, a period renowned for its scholarly pursuits, delicate arts, and a refined, almost contemplative vision of governance. Picture yourself stepping into the grand estate of a scholar official, a figure who embodied both the intellectual and political ideals of the time. The floors beneath your feet are smooth, worn gently by the padded steps of silk shoes. The scholar official, or Shida Fu, was more than a bureaucrat. He was a connoisseur of the arts, a calligrapher, a poet, a thinker. To govern well was, in part, to appreciate beauty and wisdom. Ornamental screens divide expansive halls, painted with landscapes of misty mountains, gnarled pines, tranquil rivers. Vistas designed to evoke serenity and introspection. These exams were a hallmark of the Tang Dynasty, emphasizing merit over lineage. Imagine an evening gathering within a garden pavilion, shaded by bamboo and flowering plum trees. Lanterns flickered gently in the breeze, casting soft golden light over scrolls of poetry and paintings unfurled for admiration. Candidates would spend years in secluded study, memorizing the Confucian classics, composing essays on governance, ethics. The tea ceremony was not as codified as it would later become in Japan, but it was nonetheless a mark of cultured leisure. A skilled chin player might pluck the strings of the zither, the music low and meditative as if echoing the rhythms of the universe itself, and poetry, all in the hope of securing a place within the vast imperial bureaucracy. The art of calligraphy was held in especially high esteem, considered a direct reflection of one's moral character. Building a modest retreat where he could live out his days in contemplation, and art where one could cultivate the mind and spirit, leaving behind a legacy of wisdom inscribed in ink on paper. Writing poetry and observing the play of light on water and leaves, one could not help but reflect on the contrasts that defined medieval China: the grinding hardship of the peasant, the sophisticated ambitions of emperors, the monumental achievements of engineers, and the introspective grace of the scholar official. The food, while plentiful, was prepared with balance in mind, reflecting the Confucian ideal of moderation in all things. Each brushstroke revealed discipline, temperament, and an inner harmony, or lack thereof. Imagine the air cool and fragrant with the subtle scent of sandalwood and polished lacquer. Paintings often depicted solitary figures within vast, untamed landscapes, a gentle reminder of human insignificance against the grandeur of nature. The philosophy of wabi-sabi, later embraced by the Japanese, found an early form here, a deep appreciation for the beauty of imperfection, impermanence, and simplicity. Yet within the estate, life followed a quieter rhythm, governed by the steady turning of the seasons and the measured progress of scholarly pursuits. It opened doors to positions where one could advise on statecraft, oversee provinces, or manage imperial projects, perhaps even the maintenance of the very canals we spoke of earlier. This is a world of subtle elegance, where each object, a celadon vase, a jade seal, a carefully arranged brushstand, is not merely decorative, but a statement of cultivated taste. Such men attain their status not by birthright alone, but through the grueling imperial examination system. Passing the exams was a ticket to both prestige and influence. The emperor's favor could be fickle. Political factions ebbed and flowed within the court, each promoting different philosophies: Confucian, orthodoxy, legalist pragmatism, or Taoist detachment. A misplaced word, a poorly judged policy, or an alignment with the wrong faction could result in exile, disgrace, or worse. Yet life as a scholar official was not without its demands and pressures. Still, within the confines of their estates, these men pursued a life of ritualized refinement. Tea is served, meticulously prepared with a graceful precision, whisked to a delicate froth in ceramic bowls. The conversation flows between verses of impromptu poetry, discussions of ancient texts, and reflections on the shifting patterns of politics and nature. Behind this cultivated veneer, however, was an acute awareness of transience, a hallmark of Tang Dynasty aesthetics. These scholar officials kept extensive libraries within their homes, their shelves lined with meticulously copied manuscripts, historical records, and literary works. Meals within such an estate would be a symphony of textures and flavors: delicate dumplings, fragrant broths, stir-fried greens, and steamed fish seasoned with ginger and scallions. Beyond these walls, peasants continued their toil, merchants plied their trade, and soldiers manned distant outposts. When an official retired or was forced into retirement, he might withdraw to the countryside. This was the Song scholar's ideal, a life in balance with duty. And as we gently close the doors of this refined world, returning to the present, each layer of society was distinct, yet woven together into the enduring fabric of Chinese civilization, a tapestry of toil, innovation, power, and beauty. Imagine, if you will, the breaking heat of an Egyptian midday. The sky is an unbroken stretch of pale blue, and the sun presses down on the earth with a weight that is almost physical. The air hums with the whir of insects, the faint clang of copper tools striking stone, and the low murmur of countless voices at work. You are among the laborers. Thousands of men gathered from across Egypt, brought here not as slaves, but as conscripted workers, obligated by duty, tradition, or necessity to give part of their lives to the service of the pharaoh. The ground beneath your feet is sandy and uneven, strewn with chips of limestone and granite, discarded fragments of the monumental task at hand. The scent of dust hangs in the air, dry and sharp, clinging to your skin and filling your nostrils until you can almost taste the stone itself. The sled's wooden beams groan under the weight of the stone, and every step forward requires the collective power of dozens of men. Yet despite the harshness, there is a sense of pride. To be part of the pharaoh's great project is to secure a form of immortality. For the pyramids are not just tombs, but stairways to the afterlife, monuments to eternity. The overseers walk alongside, some with staffs in hand, their voices barking orders, ensuring the rhythm of labor is maintained. In the evenings, as the sun sinks behind the western horizon, the camp comes alive with quieter sounds, laughter, conversation, the distant strains of a flute, or the rhythm of hand drums. Camps have been built nearby, rows of mud brick houses where the laborers sleep, crowded but sheltered. Priests perform ceremonies to bless the labor, to ensure that the work is favored by the gods, that misfortune is kept at bay. They sleep under the same sky that has watched over Egypt for ages, the constellation of Orion linked to Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Glittering above, simple meals are provided, bread made from emmer wheat, onions, garlic, and dried fish from the Nile. Dust from the limestone can coat the lungs, making every breath a little shallower over time. Injuries are common. And while there are rudimentary healers, practitioners of the ancient art of Egyptian medicine, there is no guarantee of recovery. Sometimes, if fortune smiles, there might be beer, thick, porridge-like but nourishing, a staple of the Egyptian diet. The flood season, when the Nile inundates the fields and farming halts, is the time when many peasants turn to labor on the pharaoh's projects, earning sustenance and state support. Decades may pass before completion, and few who start the work will see it finished. But in the mind of the worker, there is the knowledge that their efforts contribute to something that will endure far beyond their lifetime, a structure that will stand for millennia. When the waters recede, many return to their villages to plant and harvest. Others haul these heavy blocks along sledges greased with water and mud, dragging them across specially prepared roads of compacted sand and stone. Your task is repetitive, unending. Some workers carve blocks from nearby quarries with copper chisels and stone hammers, sending echoes that ripple through the hot air. Imagine the strain in your muscles, the deep ache in your back and shoulders. There is little relief from the heat, save for the occasional shade of a cloth canopy or the fleeting blessing of a breeze that stirs the desert air. Water is carried in heavy clay jars passed from worker to worker, each taking a few careful sips to stave off dehydration. But the life of a pyramid worker is not without its structures of support. The days follow a strict rhythm, work under the relentless sun. Meals, brief moments of rest, and then the return to the stone. There is also camaraderie among the workers. Songs and chants help to coordinate their efforts, their voices rising and falling with the motion of the stone. And then there is the ritual. The Egyptians believed in balance, in Mat, the cosmic order. But dangers are ever present. Stones can slip, crushing limbs or worse. The seasons govern the pace of work. Through it all, the pyramid rises slowly, block upon block, level upon level. As the stars emerge in the clear night sky, the workers retreat to their modest shelters. The ache of the day's labor still pulsing in their limbs. In the quiet of night, the great pyramid looms in the darkness, silhouette against the starlit sky, both a tomb and a testament to human perseverance. Let us now shift our gaze from the dust-covered workers and the rising pyramid to the man for whom it was all constructed, Pharaoh Khufu. His name, inscribed in ancient glyphs, has echoed through the ages. Though his true nature remains shrouded in the sands of time, here, amid the incense-scented halls and limestone courtyards, walks Khufu, a figure at once distant and commanding, the living embodiment of divine power. The most tangible representation of him is a small ivory statuette, barely 3 inches tall. Unearthed at Abydos, carved with precision, it depicts a seated figure, dignified yet unknowable, his gaze fixed eternally forward. From such a diminutive relic, we try to imagine a man who ordered the construction of the most massive stone monument ever built. He is not just a king, but a god on earth, the earthly avatar of Horus, entrusted with maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic balance and order. Copper tools were refined and distributed. Quarries at Tura and Aswan were worked tirelessly, and Nile barges carried precious stone to the building sites, and architects receiving reports on the progress of construction, the health of his kingdom's granaries, and the movements of the Nile. His court would have been a place of ceremony and protocol, where scribes recorded inventories and priests ensured that religious rites upheld the sacred order. Imagine yourself stepping into the grand courts of the Old Kingdom, around 2580 BCE during Egypt's 4th dynasty. The Wadi al-Jarraf papyri, some of the oldest known, discovered in a cave near the Red Sea, describe the transport of limestone blocks from Tura to Giza, under the command of an official named Mirror. These ancient logbooks offer a fleeting glimpse into the intricate supply chains that Khufu's administration commanded. His burial chamber, nested deep within the pyramid, is stark, adorned with little beyond the sheer immensity of stone surrounding it. Unlike the later tombs of the New Kingdom, decorated with colorful murals and spells, Khufu's resting place was austere. Its grandeur, not in decoration, but in scale. An tyrannical ruler who oppressed his people and shut the temples, focusing only on his grand pyramid. In that time, he oversaw the completion, or near completion, of the Great Pyramid, a feat that would define his legacy. But Herodotus wrote thousands of years after Khufu's reign, and his stories carry the weight of folklore and moral caution more than factual account. No remains have ever been conclusively identified as his. Devotion and labor of an entire civilization orchestrated under his rule. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber lies empty, its occupant lost to time, perhaps taken by tomb robbers in antiquity, or perhaps hidden in a manner yet undiscovered. Very little survives of Khufu's actual appearance or character. Khufu inherited the throne from his father, Snefru, who himself was a master builder. Snefru constructed not 1, but 3 large pyramids, experimenting with angles and techniques that would culminate in the more perfected form at Giza. Khufu, it seems, was determined to outshine his father, to create a monument that would defy time itself. Yet, the historical record of Khufu is sparse. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing millennia later, portrays him as a cruel Egyptian. Sources themselves are largely silent on Khufu's personal life. The king's cartouche, the oval enclosing his royal name, adorned some of the stones within the Great Pyramid, and scattered inscriptions across Egypt remind us of his authority. But there are no surviving papyri that speak of his thoughts, his voice, his manner. What we do know is that his reign was marked by immense organization, a command of logistics that marshaled labor, materials, and artistry on a scale previously unseen. We might imagine Khufu in his palace, consulting with his viziers. There's also evidence of distant expeditions during Khufu's reign, yet even a god-king is mortal. Khufu reigned for an estimated 23 years, though some sources suggest longer. At his death, Khufu would have been entombed within the massive stone labyrinth he commissioned, and yet the fate of Khufu's mummy is unknown. Still, his pyramid endures. Standing sentinel over the Giza Plateau, it is not merely a monument to Khufu's ego, but a testament to the statecraft. As we prepare to leave the shadow of Khufu's reign, we find ourselves gazing at the pyramid with new eyes, understanding not just the ambition of its creator, but the countless lives interwoven in its stones. And yet many mysteries remain. Now, as the day's heat softens into the cooler dusk over the Giza Plateau, let us remain a while in the shadow of the pyramids, for these colossal structures are not merely inert stone. They are repositories of mysteries, enigmas, that have occupied minds both ancient and modern. In its prime, it would have caught the sunlight and shimmered like a beacon visible for miles, a glistening stairway to the heavens. Imagine yourself standing before the Great Pyramid, its sides once gleaming with polished white limestone casing stones, now mostly stripped away by time and repurposing. Without modern cranes, bulldozers, or even iron tools, how did the ancient Egyptians move and position some 2.3 million blocks, each weighing on average 2.5 tons? The most accepted hypothesis suggests the use of large ramps, either straight, zigzagging, or encircling the structure, made of mud brick and limestone chippings. Some suggest internal ramps spiraling within the pyramid itself. Others propose ingenious counterweight systems or levers. On these, teams of laborers hauled stones using sledges, perhaps lubricated by water to reduce friction. Initially thought to provide ventilation, some scholars believe they had a ceremonial or astronomical function, perhaps aligning with particular stars, guiding the pharaoh's soul to the afterlife. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, employing Muon radiography, a method using cosmic rays to detect voids, discovered a large, previously unknown cavity above the Grand Gallery. In later antiquity, the Greeks and Romans viewed them as repositories of arcane wisdom, alchemical secrets, or treasure troves. Arab historians of the medieval period recorded tales of hidden texts, astronomical knowledge, or even pre-flood relics secreted within. Dubbed the Big Void, its purpose and contents, if any, remain a mystery. Some theorize it may have been a structural necessity to relieve weight. Others imagine hidden chambers yet to be explored. The question of how such a monument was built has intrigued historians, archaeologists, and engineers for centuries. Theories abound, each proposing its own method with varying degrees of plausibility. But before we depart ancient Egypt entirely, let us step for a moment into the lives of those at the other end of society, the ones who lived in comfort, prestige, and influence. Perhaps that is part of the pyramid's enduring power. It invites inquiry, imagination, and wonder, even after millennia. The sides of the pyramid align almost perfectly with the cardinal points: north, south, east, and west, a feat requiring careful observation of the stars and the horizon. The gaps between stones are often so fine that a blade cannot easily pass between them. An eternal presence in the cycle of day and night, life and death. Beyond serving as a tomb, the pyramid embodied cosmic order. Its shape reflected the primordial mound of creation, the Ben Bun, which emerged from the waters of chaos in Egyptian mythology. Its sides echoed the rays of the sun, symbolically connecting the earthbound pharaoh to the divine realm of Ra, the sun god. Yet no definitive physical evidence of these massive ramps has ever been found, leaving room for speculation. The precision with which the blocks were cut and placed also fuels wonder. There is the king's chamber, with its enigmatic granite sarcophagus, the queen's chamber whose purpose remains debated, and the grand gallery, an ascending corridor of remarkable height and precision. Deep within the pyramid, the layout of chambers and corridors further mystifies. And then there are the so-called air shafts, narrow channels extending from the chambers to the pyramid's exterior. In recent years, advanced technologies have revealed new secrets. Beyond the architectural, myths and folklore swirl around the pyramids, yet, despite these alluring legends, no treasure hoard has been found inside the Great Pyramid, unless we consider knowledge itself to be the treasure. Another enduring question is, why build such a monumental structure? Thus, the pyramid was not merely a resting place but a cosmological machine, a guarantee of the king's rebirth. As we stand in thought before these ageless stones, the whispers of the past remind us that not every mystery yields its answers easily. And while we may never unlock every secret, the pyramid remains, a silent guardian of ancient ambition, a testament to a civilization's reach for eternity. With that, we begin to move away from these towering monuments and the riddles they contain. Now, let us step quietly into a different world altogether, away from the dusty construction sites and toward the lavish interiors of a royal palace. In the grand courts of the pharaoh's life unfolded with a rhythm all its own, slower, more deliberate, steeped in ceremony and layered in intricate hierarchies. The air here is heavy with the sense of imported incense, frankincense from Punt or from distant lands, blending with the more familiar aromas of lotus blossoms from nearby pools and gardens. Walls are decorated with vivid frescoes depicting scenes of abundance, hunting, fishing, dancing, all idealized visions of eternal prosperity. But the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god, and upon death united with Osiris, lord of the underworld, the pharaoh's presence is both uninspiring and carefully curated, their public appearances rare and framed with ritual. A headdress, often the striped nenis, frames the face, while the ceremonial crook and flail, symbols of guidance and authority, are never far. Imagine yourself approaching the gates of a sprawling palace complex in ancient Memphis or Thebes. Cities that once thrummed with the energy of Egypt's political and spiritual life. Wine from the Delta, beer brewed from Immer wheat, all served in ornate vessels of gold or faience. The palace itself is a marvel of architecture. Painted columns adorned with floral motifs, wide courtyards for gatherings, and private quarters screened from the common eye. Musicians play soft melodies on harps and lyres, dancers move in graceful patterns, and poets recite hymns to the gods or odes to the pharaoh's greatness. Attendants assist in the careful ritual of dressing, not merely for comfort or style, but as an enactment of divine symbolism. The pharaoh himself leads or commissions grand rituals, ensuring the concept of cosmic order and balance is maintained. Every gesture, every offering is part of sustaining this fragile harmony between the human and divine realms. And priests, each vying for influence, each navigating the delicate politics of proximity to power. Even family ties can be fraught. Queens, concubines, and royal offspring often engage in subtle contests for favor, status, and future succession. Jewelry is not mere ornamentation, but protection. Amulets against evil, bracelets inscribed with protective prayers. To the monumental ambitions of kings, the mysteries hidden within stone, and the fragile comforts of the elite. Scribes deliver news from across the kingdom, grain yields from the Nile Delta, reports from quarry expeditions, missives from foreign dignitaries. Every message is carefully recorded, sealed with clay and string, ensuring that the machinery of the state runs smoothly. Perhaps seated on a cushioned dais, the pharaoh listens to the soft plucking of a harp, the flickering of oil lamps casting gentle light across painted walls. Conversations may meander through matters of state, reflections on the day's omens, or the latest gossip from distant provinces. The alignment of stars, the flight of birds, the patterns left by oil poured into water, all can be messages from the gods, deciphered by the learned few. At the center of this world sits the pharaoh, Not just a king, their day begins early. The pharaoh's garments might be linen of the finest weave, soft and nearly translucent, layered to suit the climate. As the morning unfolds, the palace hums with activity. Meals for the pharaoh are prepared by specialized chefs who source delicacies from across the empire. Figs, pomegranates, dates, honey-sweetened pastries, and fish from the Nile. Entertainment is essential in the palace. It's not only for diversion, but as an affirmation of order and prosperity. Among these performers, the griots of Egypt, though called by other names, are keepers of memory, reciting lineages, heroic deeds, and mythologies that root the present firmly in the past. Yet palace life is not without intrigue. Within the court swirl the ambitions of viziers, generals. Religious life intertwines closely with governance. Temples receive lavish donations, and priests wield considerable power. And within the seclusion of private chambers, the pharaoh may consult with astrologers and magicians, seeking interpretations of dreams or portents. Evenings in the palace are marked by more intimate gatherings. Imagine, then, the contrast. The stone bearer, toiling under the relentless sun, their muscles aching, their belly empty, while in the palace, cool air circulates through shaded courtyards, and the taste of honeyed wine lingers on the tongue. Both lives are tethered to the same grand enterprise, the building of eternity, whether in stone or in memory. And now, as our journey through the layers of ancient Egypt draws to a close, let us settle into the quiet reflection of all we have seen, from the laborers and their burdens. Imagine yourself waking up to the lurching sway of a wooden ship groaning against the endless waves. Your bed is not a bed at all, but a crude hammock, damp from the ever-present humidity, strung between two posts deep in the bowels of the ship. Tasks: scrubbing the deck, hoisting sails, repairing ropes worn thin by the wind, but the toil is ceaseless. The alternative is beer or watered-down wine, but even these spoil eventually, leaving a sour tang on your tongue. Food is no reprieve. Your diet consists mostly of hardtack, dense flour and water biscuit that is nearly indestructible but utterly tasteless, and salted meat so tough it must be soaked for hours to be edible. Days blend together in a haze of repetitive tasks, the horizon never changing, the ship an isolated world where tempers flare and boredom festers. Most are paid poorly, if at all, and many are simply pressed into service, kidnapped, or coerced into the crew. There is little chance for advancement, and even less for escape. The ship is your world, the sea your prison. Fights break out over petty grievances, and discipline is maintained through fear. The rise and fall of the ship, the shifting patterns of the stars, the distant cries of seabirds when land approaches, all these create a strange, hypnotic pattern. It is a brutal life, but one that settles into a routine, like the endless beating of waves against the hull. The Cateau 9 tells a brutal whip keeps sailors in line. It scars a constant reminder of the consequences of disobedience. You find yourself simply enduring like so many others before. You adrift in a world both vast and merciless. Often, these rations are infested with weevils and maggots, yet hunger leaves you little choice but to eat. Your hands are rough and calloused, your back perpetually sore, and the salt air chafes your skin until it cracks and bleeds. Around you, dozens of other men stir and cough, the air thick with the mingled smells of sweat, salt, and the unwashed. And waves rising like walls to crash down upon the vessel. These are moments when the sea asserts its dominion. Men are washed overboard, never to be seen again, or crushed beneath falling masts and broken rigging. There are no lifeboats, no safety nets. Only the certainty that the sea is indifferent to your struggle. The day begins before the sun properly rises. Orders shouted by officers echo through the decks, leaving little room for hesitation. Fevers sweep through the crew with ruthless efficiency, and there is no real treatment. If you fall ill, you are either left to recover on your own, or quietly expire in the dark corners of the hold. The dead are sewn into their hammocks and slid into the sea, disappearing with barely a ripple. Water is scarce. You ration what little fresh water is stored in wooden barrels, which often turns brackish and slimy with algae after weeks at sea. Disease is your constant companion. Scurvy, that dreaded affliction born from a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables, turns your gums spongy and your teeth loose. Storms are perhaps the greatest terror. The sudden shift of the sky from blue to gray, the wind howling like some ancient, angry god, and when the weather is calm, monotony takes over. The promise of riches, of gold and new lands rarely touches the sailor's life. Yet amidst all this, there is a rhythm. And so as you adjust your hammock for another restless sleep, the timbers, creaking overhead, and the faint scent of tar and salt lingering in the air. Let us now leave the weary deckhand and shift our gaze to a singular journey in the annals of exploration, a voyage that sought to redefine the boundaries of the world, led by a man named Ferdinand Magellan. As you relax deeper into stillness, imagine standing upon the deck of the flagship Trinidad. The wind steady in the sails, as the coast of Spain slowly disappears from view. It was an expedition navigated not by precise maps, but by uncertainty, rumor, and the stars. Fresh food runs out quickly, and the water begins to stagnate. The men quarrel, some whisper of mutiny, for what lies ahead is unknown, and men fear what they do not understand. It was the year 1519, when Magellan, Portuguese navigator sailing under the Spanish crown, set out to find a western route to the famed Spice Islands known today as the Maluku Islands in Indonesia. The waters here are deceptive calm, one moment, roaring the next. The land rises forbidding and desolate on either side. Disease spread unchecked, and death became a quiet companion waiting patiently among the crew. Cold winds howl through narrow channels, and fog clings stubbornly to the surface, obscuring sight and sound alike. In the Philippines, Magellan, ever confident, became embroiled in local conflicts. Of the original 270 men, only 18 returned to Spain, emaciated and hollow-eyed, the holds of their ship heavy with spices. His dream of a westward route to the spices was realized. But the true discovery was the sobering vastness of the world itself, a world where the ocean could swallow not only ships, but entire hopes. He sought to impress and convert the islanders, aligning with one chieftain against another. They had seen the curvature of the earth with their own eyes, but at great personal cost. The sea had stripped them of comrades, of health, and in some cases of sanity. It was in such a clash on the island of Mactan that Magellan was killed speared. And overwhelmed in shallow waters, his ambition ending not with triumph, but with his body left behind in foreign sands. And turn our thoughts inland, to the mysteries that lie buried beneath the sands and shores of another sea, the Caribbean, where shipwrecks and submerged ruins whisper of yet more stories. Spices then were precious beyond imagination, worth their weight in gold, desired for their ability to preserve food and perfume the air. Yet few could imagine the immense hardships this journey would demand. 5 ships carried roughly 270 men across the unknown, following the contours of the South American coast in search of a passage to the other side of the continent. Imagine yourself on board weeks into the voyage. The Atlantic stretches endlessly, the sun relentless by day, the chill penetrating at night. Eventually the fleet finds the treacherous strait at the southern tip of the continent, later named the Strait of Magellan. One of the ships the San Antonio deserts and returns to Spain, but the rest press on. Emerging finally into the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, a sea that Magellan named for its deceptive tranquility, yet the Pacific was no gentle passage. The crossing would take more than 3 months, a time of suffering almost beyond description. There were no lands to rest upon, no harbors, only the ceaseless rolling of waves and the glitter of stars at night. The men boiled leather strips for food, gnawed on sawdust and crumbs of biscuit, their gums bleeding from scurvy, their teeth loosening and falling out. The accounts described the horror of hunger, how rats fetched high prices as the only fresh meat available. Water, thick with slime, was rationed carefully. At last, land was sighted, the Mariana Islands, and later the Philippines. The relief of landfall was fleeting, however, yet the voyage did not end with him. The remnants of the expedition, reduced to a single ship, the Victoria, pressed on westward, finally completing the first circumnavigation of the globe. Their journey was heralded as a triumph, but for those who survived, it was a brutal testament to human endurance. For Magellan himself, his name lives on, tied forever to the strait and the circumnavigation, though he did not live to see it completed. As the waves continue their gentle rhythm, let us leave the salt-streaked decks behind. Now, as you imagine the gentle sway of the sea beneath your feet, we dive beneath the surface to explore the hidden world beneath the Caribbean waves. Realm of sunken ships, lost treasures, and silent stories buried in sand and coral. It witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the clashing of cultures, and the relentless quest for wealth. Yet beneath its shimmering surface lies a vast underwater graveyard, a testament to the dangers that sailors faced in this tropical paradise. The Caribbean Sea, with its turquoise waters and gentle trade winds, was once a bustling highway of exploration, commerce, and conquest. These are the remnants of ships that met their end on hidden reefs during sudden storms, or in fierce battles for control of the seas. Picture yourself floating just below the waves, the sunlight filtering through the water in shifting patterns, illuminating fragments of timber, rusted iron, and scattered cargo. Others may lie buried beneath thick layers of coral, their stories waiting patiently to be told once more. Each artifact recovered adds a brushstroke to the portrait of life and death on these perilous waters. Cargo, the ship's design, even the arrangement of the crew's quarters all reveal aspects of the sailors' lives, their fears, hopes, and routines. One of the most famous wrecks is the Spanish galleon, Nuestra Señora de Atocha, which sank in 1622 during a hurricane off the coast of Florida. Shipwrecks reflect this rich tapestry, carrying goods and personal belongings from far-flung corners of the globe, merging stories across oceans. The only sound is the gentle bubbling of your breath as you explore corridors of ancient wood, imagining the hands that built them and the lives they carried. In grand halls far from the hardships of the deck or the silent depths, a world of power, luxury, and political intrigue in the age of sail, their movements slow and deliberate, as if paying respect to the countless souls who perished when wood cracked and sails tore in the chaos of storms. They uncover shards of pottery, rusted cannons, and the delicate glint of coins, a tangible connection to lives long past, laden with silver, gold, emeralds, and other treasures from the New World. The Atocha now rests silently beneath the waves, guarded by schools of fish and the slow passage of time. The creaking timbers and torn sails speak of sudden tempests that left little chance for escape, of skirmishes where lives were lost over fleeting riches, and of the relentless toll of the sea itself, force indifferent to human ambition. Over centuries, storms and shifting sands have both concealed and revealed its secrets. Imagine the divers who, centuries later, descend carefully into these underwater catacombs. The Caribbean's shipwrecks tell tales not only of fortune but also of hardship. Yet beyond the treasures, these wrecks hold mysteries. Some ships vanished without trace, their fates whispered only by legend. Archaeologists and historians piece together these underwater puzzles, using tools like sonar and remote-operated vehicles to map the seafloor. The Caribbean was also a meeting point of cultures. Spanish conquistadors, indigenous peoples, enslaved Africans, pirates, and traders. Imagine the quiet solitude of a night dive, the ocean around you vast and endless. As we leave these submerged worlds behind, let your mind drift slowly upward with the tide, towards the sunlit shores. As you let the ocean breeze fade from your thoughts, imagine now stepping into a vastly different world, the grand palace of a Babylonian king. Far removed from the relentless toil of sailors and shipwrecks, this is a place where power, luxury, and political intrigue converge beneath soaring walls adorned with glazed bricks, deep gardens, and intricate artwork. Imagine yourself walking through massive gateways. Guarded by imposing stone lions and winged bulls, their forms both protective and awe-inspiring. The air is thick with the scent of cedar wood, blooming date palms, and incense burned in ceremonial chambers. The city of Babylon, resting on the fertile plains near the Euphrates River, was one of the ancient world's greatest centers of culture and authority. Inside, life moved to a different rhythm, the rhythm of court politics, religious ceremonies, and sumptuous feasts. The palace was not just a home, it was the heart of administration, diplomacy, and royal spectacle. Music, poetry, and storytelling filled the air, weaving tales of gods and heroes, history and myth, as the flicker of oil lamps cast warm shadows on elaborately painted walls. Here the king surrounded himself with advisors, scribes, artisans, and servants, each playing a role in the delicate balance of power. Court life was a maze of entreaty political rivals maneuvered for favor. Foreign emissaries sought alliances or plotted their own ambitions, and the king's decisions could ripple across the empire, affecting both the elite and the common people. You might picture the king seated on a throne, clad in robes of fine wool, dyed vibrant with lapis lazuli blue or rich crimson. It was a place where human ambition, culture, and the desire for legacy intertwined, creating a complex tapestry of power that shaped history itself. His hair was curled and adorned with gold, his presence commanding yet carefully measured. Around him, courtiers whispered alliances, rivalries, and the delicate politics that kept the empire in order. These gardens were not merely decorative, but served as symbols of the king's power to command nature itself, a display of wealth and control. Beyond the halls of governance, the palace gardens offered a rare oasis, a marvel of irrigation and design. These gardens were famed for their beauty, lush with fruit trees, fragrant flowers, and cooling pools. Ancient texts speak of the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, believed to be an extraordinary feat of engineering. Though their true existence remains a mystery debated by historians, imagine the gentle murmur of water flowing through stone channels, the rustle of leaves stirred by a soft breeze, and the distant laughter of attendants preparing for a feast. The banquets that followed were lavish affairs where guests reclined on cushions, savoring food seasoned with exotic spices and honeyed wine. Yet beneath the surface of this elegance lay constant vigilance. This palace, with all its grandeur, was a world apart from the sailors battling storms or the miners toiling underground. As the evening draws to a close and the palace settles into quiet shadows, imagine yourself stepping back outside, the stars twinkling over Babylon's walls, the city alive with the distant sounds of life and stories yet untold. Imagine yourself at dawn, just as the first pale light touches the tiled rooftops of a Mughal city. The bazaars are beginning to stir. Traders arrange their wares with careful hands, textiles dyed in deep indigos and crimsons, glistening jewels, hand-thrown pottery, and finely wrought metalwork. The air is cool, but already scented with cardamom, cinnamon, and the faint smoke of small fires used to warm water or prepare simple meals. Most workers here wake long before dawn, their days stretching endlessly as they mend, craft, or carry goods under the watchful eyes of tax collectors and city officials. Each object is a story, each piece a fragment of the empire's vast tapestry. Taxes imposed by the imperial government weigh heavily. Traders must pay duties on goods crossing city gates, and artisans often work under guild restrictions that limit how freely they can trade or set prices. Vendors pause to share a moment over a cup of sweet tea. Children dart between stalls, and musicians sometimes play soft melodies that drift through the air like a gentle breeze. Imagine the faint sounds of foreign tongues blending with the familiar dialects of the region, creating a mosaic of culture that defines the Mughal Empire's enduring legacy. The market is a place where every coin counts, and competition is fierce. Merchants wipe their brows and adjust their wares, the steady business continuing until evening calls the city to slow. Merchants guard their secrets, carefully recipes for dyes, patterns for carpets, or techniques for crafting delicate glass. Life here is a constant, steady rhythm. For many, the bazaar is both home and workplace. Wooden stalls lean close together, their roofs patched with cloth and palm leaves to provide shade against the heat that will soon intensify. The narrow lanes wind like veins through the city, filled with the slow shuffle of feet, the murmur of conversation. Water is a precious commodity, carried in clay pots by women and boys, while food is simple lentils, flatbreads, and occasional vegetables grown in small garden plots. Diseases spread quickly in crowded streets, remind everyone of the fragile line between survival and sickness. And the occasional sharp cry of a vendor trying to catch a customer's attention, but the surface bustle hides a relentless grind. Imagine the hands of the artisans calloused and stained from years of labor, delicately weaving threads into fabric, shaping clay on a wheel, or hammering soft metals into intricate jewelry. Despite the wealth that flows through the bazaars from silks imported from Persia to spices from the Malabar coast, the lives of many here are far from easy. And then there are the practical hardships. The heat in summer can be suffocating, thick with dust and sweat. Still, amid this demanding life, there is a rhythm that settles in a steady pulse of life, that binds the people to their work and to each other. The bazaar is also a crossroads and meeting place where news travels, alliances form, and the world beyond the city's walls arrives in the form of exotic goods and travelers. As the sun climbs higher, the streets grow hotter, the shadows shorter. This, then, is life in a Mughal bazaar, well-part struggle and endurance. Tradition and change, all woven together in a slow, steady rhythm that has echoed through centuries. As the bustle of the bazaar winds down with the setting sun, let us quietly step away from the crowded lanes and turn our attention to the grand figure who shaped much of the Mughal world. Emperor Akbar, one of the most remarkable rulers of the early modern era. In one of the palace's audience halls sits Akbar, not yet the portly elder of his later years, but a vigorous, sharp-eyed monarch, curious about everything within his realm and beyond. Imagine, if you will, a vast palace complex, shred sandstone walls glowing gently in the evening light, lush gardens spread out in carefully ordered symmetry, and the faint, persistent trickle of water flowing through ornate channels. Born in 1542, Akbar came to the throne of the Mughal Empire as a mere boy, only 13 years old, following the sudden death of his father, Humayun, and learned men speaking of philosophy, ethics, and theology. While Akbar listened, questioned, and pondered, he sought to create a syncretic belief system. The Din-i-Ilahi, or religion of God, which drew from many traditions. Though it never gained widespread following beyond his inner circle, the empire he inherited was fragile and fragmented, its dominion uncertain, and its enemies many. He overhauled the tax system, striving for more equitable assessments based on land productivity rather than arbitrary demands. When he died in 1605, he left behind not just an empire of land, but an empire of ideas, a legacy of tolerance, inquiry, and cultural blending that would define the Mughal era at its height. His military campaigns could be ruthless. Cities that resisted were sometimes met with harsh reprisals. His court, though rich in diversity, was also a place of hierarchy and control, where favor could rise and fall with the emperor's shifting priorities. His policies encouraged agriculture, trade, and the arts, fostering a period of relative prosperity and cultural flourishing. Campaigns in Rajputana, Gujarat, and the Deccan saw Akbar extend his authority across much of the Indian subcontinent. His military conquests, while often relentless, were tempered by a keen strategy of alliance and diplomacy. We can reflect on the life of this remarkable Emperor Akbar the Great, whose curiosity and ambition shaped a world as complex and layered as the markets that flourished under his rule. Hunting expeditions, philosophical discussions, and architectural projects filled his days. Among his many constructions, the city of Fatehpur Sikri stands out, a planned city with stunning palaces and mosques built in red sandstone, though it would later be abandoned due to water shortages. Rather than merely subjugate his foes, he sought to incorporate them, bringing Rajput princes into his court, marrying into noble Hindu families, and granting them prominent positions within his administration. Yet guided by the skilled regent Bairam Khan, and soon enough by his own astute mind, Akbar began to transform his precarious inheritance into a cohesive and formidable power. Picture the Diwanikas, the hall of private audience, where scholars, poets, theologians, and artists gathered. It was here that Akbar, ever the curious mind, entertained debates between Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Jains, and even Jesuit missionaries from faraway Europe. He was not a scholar in the formal sense. He was illiterate, in fact, but his intellect was vast, and his memory prodigious. You might picture his early years spent not in quiet study, no, but on the march, learning the ways of war, the challenges of leadership, and the complexities of governing a diverse and sprawling realm. Akbar's court itself was a reflection of his eclectic interests and his vision of unity amidst diversity. Imagine the evenings at court, the soft glow of oil lamps, the scent of rosewater lingering in the air. Akbar's administrative reforms, too, left an indelible mark. Yet, like all rulers, Akbar was not without contradiction. In his personal life, Akbar was surrounded by a large household of wives, his concubines, and attendants, yet he often sought solitude for reflection. As Akbar aged, his empire stood vast and relatively stable, a testament to his governance, and so in the quiet after the din of the bazaar, as we move away from the grandeur of Akbar's court and his wide-ranging conquests, let us now wander into spaces of a quieter yet equally profound expression of power and beauty. The gardens and waterworks of the Mughal Empire. Imagine yourself walking through a garden at dawn. The air is cool and heavy with the fragrance of night-blooming jasmine. Birds flutter from tree to tree, their songs faint and tentative in the early light. The term sharbug refers to a garden divided into 4 parts. A quadrilateral that symbolically echoed the Islamic vision of paradise, as described in the Quran. Gardens beneath which rivers flow. Beneath your feet, the stone pathways are slick with morning dew, while the white marble mausoleum dominates the imagination. It is set within a grand sharbug garden. It's carefully designed so that from any vantage point, the symmetry of the water channels leads your eyes to the tomb itself, reflected perfectly in the pools of water. The mules invested considerable resources into practical engineering feats, constructing elaborate queues, or underground channels, and stepwells that captured monsoon rains. Teams of engineers, laborers, and artisans working under the searing sun to carve out underground channels, to align aqueducts, to line cisterns with stone. Their work was as much about survival as it was about aesthetics, a testament to human ingenuity harnessing nature's capriciousness. These were vital in cities that faced long dry seasons, ensuring that urban centers remained habitable and that agriculture could thrive even in less hospitable climates. Marble floors were inlaid with slender channels where water flowed gently, cooling the air in the height of summer. In some palaces, entire rooms were designed with water walls, where sheets of liquid shimmered like translucent curtains, diffusing light and heat. The garden and the monument together were conceived as an integrated experience, a journey through cultivated paradise toward a symbol of eternal love. Desire to capture paradise on earth, if only briefly, against the ever-turning wheel of time? Picture the glow of oil lamps reflected in the still pools, the air perfumed with rose water sprayed from delicate vessels, and the murmur of poetry recited under the stars. Music might drift through the trees, the soft strains of a sitar or the rhythmic beats of a tabla, creating a space where nature, architecture, and art intertwined. They represented power, cosmology, and a ruler's capacity to impose harmony on nature. The layout was precise, pathways crossing at right angles, creating geometric symmetry, while flowing water not only cooled the air, but also symbolized abundance and divine favor. Many fell to neglect or conquest, their intricate channels clogged, their fountains dry, their trees overgrown or gone entirely. Yet remnants survive, in Agra, in Lahore, in Delhi, where one can still walk the paths once trodden by emperors, poets, and courtiers, and imagine a time when water flowed freely in carefully sculpted streams, and the world was for a moment ordered and harmonious. And ahead of you, a narrow channel of water trickles gently, its surface catching glints of the awakening sun. These were the Sharbag Gardens, a Persian concept carried into India and elevated by Mughal architects and planners into masterpieces of landscape design. For the mules, these gardens were not mere places of leisure. Consider the Shalimar Bagh in Kashmir, created under the rule of Jahangir, Akbar's son. Here, the coolness of the Himalayan air mingled with the sounds of cascading water, as elaborate fountains and channels fed from distant mountain streams turned the arid landscape into a lush haven. It was said that Jahangir himself was deeply fond of Kashmir, and the Shalimar Bagh was his love letter to the land, a refuge of tranquility and aesthetic delight. Then there is the Taj Mahal, built by Shah Jahan, Akbar's grandson, arguably the most famous architectural creation of the Mughal era. Water management was not just ornamental, however. Imagine the effort behind these systems. Within the private confines of the emperor's palaces, water continued to flow, not just in gardens, but indoors. At night, these gardens and water features transformed yet again. But even these gardens, for all their beauty, were not permanent. The rhythm of these gardens, the steady flow of water, the geometry of paths, the changing seasons of bloom and decay. We glimpse a philosophy of life itself. And now, as we step out of the verdant tranquility of the Mughal gardens, we find ourselves approaching the heart of imperial life, the great palaces where emperors resided, and within them, the secretive, bustling world of the Mughal court. The towering gates opened slowly, revealing a labyrinth of marble halls, audience chambers, private courtyards, and intricately carved balconies. The air is rich with the scent of incense and fresh flowers, mingling with the distant strains of music and the murmurs of voices in courtly conversation. Imagine yourself standing before the red sandstone walls of the Red Fort in Delhi, or the majestic Agra Fort. To live within the palace was to exist in a world of rigid hierarchy, dazzling luxury, and constant vigilance. Here, the famed peacock throne once stood, encrusted with precious gems. Emeralds, rubies, miniature paintings depicted scenes of courtly life, battles, and epic tales with exquisite detail, capturing not just likenesses but the spirit of the times. Imagine painters hunched over their work, their brushes fine as a single hair, mixing pigments from crushed gemstones and gold leaf. Under the patronage of a discerning emperor, a courtier might spend years mastering etiquette, poetry, and military strategy, only to fall from favor in a day. Dining was part ritual, part display, and the emperor's preferences could elevate a dish to fashion or consign it to oblivion. Political intrigue was a constant undercurrent, and exile, imprisonment, or worse could be the swift result of a miscalculation. And human ambition set against the backdrop of some of the most beautiful architecture the world has ever known. Every garden, every whispered word in a palace chamber spoke of an empire at its zenith. And diamonds. A seat that was itself a statement of the empire's unmatched wealth and sophistication. Musicians perfected their art in intimate gatherings, where the emperor and his select companions would listen attentively. Sometimes until the early hours, savoring the intricate compositions, and the night when the palace grew quiet, save for the distant call of a night watchman or the faint plucking of strings from a private chamber. The emperor sat aloof, yet attentive, as courtiers vied for attention, offering gifts, news, or the latest verses of poetry. The Mughal court was a carefully choreographed theater, where every gesture, every word, and every display of wealth or wisdom was laden with meaning. Courtiers, nobles, poets, scholars, and attendants each played their part in the daily performance of imperial power. Picture the Diwanakos, the hall of private audience, where the emperor would receive selected guests and dignitaries. It was not just a place of seclusion for the emperor's wives and concubines, but also a center of education, culture, and even political influence. Women in the harem, especially those of high status, commissioned buildings, corresponded with governors, and sometimes shaped the course of imperial policy. Figures like Nur Jahan, the wife of Jahangir, wielded remarkable power, issuing royal decrees and participating in governance. But beyond these formal gatherings, life in the palace was a maze of intrigue and subtle maneuvering. The courtiers were not merely ornamental figures, they were politicians, spies, and patrons of the arts. Alliances were formed and broken with whispers in shaded corridors, and favor could rise or fall with a word. The harem, a misunderstood and often romanticized part of the palace, was its own world. Art flourished within these walls. The Mughal court was a crucible of cultural fusion, blending Persian, Indian, and Central Asian influences. Music, too, was ever present. Courts were filled with the delicate melodies of the sitar, to the resonant vibrations of the tanpura, and the complex rhythms of the tabla. Yet for all the splendor, life at court was far from idyllic. The expectations were relentless. Meals in the palace were grand affairs, rich curries, fragrant rice, roasted meats, and confections of honey and nuts. Yet even here, there was formality. Imagine then the rhythm of daily life. The morning assemblies, the whispered consultations in shadowed alcoves, the afternoon sessions of music and verse, the evening banquets under canopies lit by oil lamps. This was the heartbeat of the Mughal court, an unending dance of power, culture, and as we leave these corridors of marble and gold, we return to the present carrying with us echoes of a time when every stone. Picture yourself, if you will, waking just before dawn in the city of Constantinople. The narrow streets are still cloaked in shadow, though a faint glow begins to outline the domes and towers. You are an apprentice, perhaps, or a journeyman artisan, your body already aching from yesterday's efforts. A thin porridge, or a crust of bread might be your breakfast. Just enough to stave off the morning's hunger. Then it is off to the workshop. These workshops, scattered throughout the bustling city, especially near the markets and the Grand Hagia Sophia, are nothing like the clean, well-lit studios we might picture today. There is little ventilation save for a small window or a doorway propped open when the weather allows. The furnaces must remain at precise temperatures, the molten glass glowing like captured sunlight. You might spend your hours mixing mortars, hauling heavy loads, fetching tools, or sweeping the ever-accumulating debris. The masters are stern, their tempers often short. For any delay in a project can bring financial loss, or worse, the ire of a noble patron or church official. You sit on a stone block or an upturned crate, muscles thankful for the short reprieve. Before the day resumes with the same grueling rhythm, to shape it requires not only skill but speed, as the material hardens quickly. There is little comfort waiting at home, a shared room. Perhaps in a crowded tenement where sleep comes hard and early, only to be broken by the demands of another dawn. A misstep, a wobble of the wrist, and hours of preparation are lost, yet essential to the creation of the empire's lasting beauty. The soaring domes, the glittering mosaics, the carved reliefs that still awe us today. In winter, the cold creeps in, making hands stiff and slow to respond. Injury, illness, or the simple wear of time calls many before they reach mastery. In summer, the heat becomes stifling, oppressive, a physical weight that presses on your shoulders. Communication is brief and functional. There is little time or energy for pleasantries. Instead, imagine a low-ceilinged space, its walls blackened with soot, the floor strewn with tools, fragments of stone, shards of glass, and slivers of wood. Light filters dimly through small windows, marking the slow progress of the sun. As dusk approaches, the tools are laid down, the fires banked, and the day's labor is assessed. Mistakes are noted, corrections planned for the morrow. If you are a mosaicist, your day will be spent carefully selecting tiny tesserae, those colorful cubes of glass, stone, or ceramic, and setting them meticulously into beds of wet mortar. It is exacting work, demanding both precision and patience, as a misaligned piece could ruin the pattern and invite a master's wrath. The forge glows with a ferocious orange, and each strike of the hammer sends a spray of sparks into the air. The rhythm of the hammer becomes familiar, the feel of stone under the chisel grows predictable. The delicate dance of fitting glass into mortar becomes less daunting. Slowly, imperceptibly, one transforms from a laborer into a craftsman. Protective gear is minimal, perhaps an apron of thick leather if you are lucky, but often just layers of coarse cloth. Burns are inevitable, scars commonplace. The air is thick with the mingled smells of sweat, burning charcoal, damp stone, and iron. The dust rises with each strike, clinging to your skin, your hair, your lungs. Coughing is common, a rough, persistent sound that echoes among your fellows, many of whom bear the stooped posture and battered hands of lifelong labor. Your tasks will vary depending on your trade. If you are a stonemason, your days echo with the rhythm of chisel on marble, the repetitive, almost meditative percussion that shapes columns, capitals, and reliefs. Blacksmiths, working with iron and bronze, face a different set of trials. Glassmakers, too, labor in a world of heat and fragility. For apprentices, the work is less glamorous still. The din is relentless. Hammering, chiseling, the crackle of fires, the low murmur of artisans coordinating their tasks. Meals are brief pauses in the day. Bread, olives, perhaps a bit of salted fish or cheese if fortune favors you. Hours blur together. By nightfall, your body aches, your hands are calloused, your back sore, yet within this hardship is the slow, steady accumulation of skill. Each day, the apprentice learns a little more. But the journey is long, and many do not see it through. Thus was the life of a worker in the Byzantine workshop. Repetitive, exhausting, and now, as we step away from the heat and din of the workshop, our path takes us further. From the labor of the artisan to the life of an emperor, let us now leave behind the dust and clamor of the workshops, and instead ascend the marble steps of the great palace in Constantinople. Here, in corridors adorned with intricate mosaics and perfumed with the scent of incense and exotic oils, we meet the figure who defined an entire epoch of the Byzantine world, Emperor Justinian. At the far end, seated on a throne of gold and ivory, is Justinian himself, robed in deep purple, the color reserved for emperors, his presence both regal and austere. Imagine yourself standing in a vast, echoing hall, its ceiling disappearing into shadow, gilded surfaces catching the flicker of lamplight. But who was this man? And what was the empire he sought to forge? Yet through ambition, intelligence, and the favor of his uncle Justin, who himself rose from soldier to emperor, Justinian climbed to power. The Corpus Juris Civilis, or the Justinian Code, remains one of his most enduring legacies. An attempt to systematize centuries of Roman law into a clear, quote, organized collection that would influence legal systems for centuries thereafter. When he became emperor in 527 CE, his vision for Byzantium was grand, even audacious, to restore the Roman Empire to its former territorial glory. Plagues swept through the empire, the so-called Plague of Justinian, a devastating pandemic that claimed countless lives, emptying villages. Coupled with the endless expense of warfare and the political machinations of the imperial court, Justinian's dream of restoring Rome was slowly, inexorably slipping away, and leaving entire neighborhoods of Constantinople eerily silent but for the caw of crows. Justinian was born to a family of modest means in the Balkans, far from the cosmopolitan heart of Constantinople. His ambitions were not merely martial. He was a man of law, theology, and architecture. It was under Justinian's reign that the Hagia Sophia rose, that architectural marvel with its massive dome floating seemingly weightless above the city's skyline. Entering the Hagia Sophia, one was said to feel as though they had stepped into heaven itself. His reign had been both a pinnacle and a portent, showing the heights Byzantium could reach and the depths it might yet fall to. Yet perhaps what captures the imagination most is his campaign to reconquer the western provinces, North Africa, Italy, parts of Spain, lands long lost to the so-called barbarian kingdoms that had risen after Rome's fall. It was a monument not just to faith, but to the empire's grandeur, even as its foundations trembled. Justinian's most trusted general, Belisarius, a name that echoes through military history, led the legions with remarkable skill. Picture now the clank of armor, the deliberate march of soldiers, the banners fluttering above as they retook the Vandal kingdom in North Africa. Then to Italy, where war raged for years against the Ostrogoths, reducing once prosperous cities like Rome to shadows of their former selves. These campaigns were arduous, brutal, and costly. Victory came, but at a heavy price. The empire's coffers strained under the cost of war. The plague not only decimated the population but weakened the empire's ability to hold on to its reclaimed territories. And yet, amidst the gloom of war and pestilence, there was brilliance. Imagine the golden glow of its interior, the shimmer of light reflecting off thousands of tiny gold leaf tesserae, the immense expanse of space that seems both intimate and infinite. By the time of Justinian's death in 565 CE, the empire was a paradox. Territorially expanded, yet financially strained. Culturally resplendent, yet socially exhausted. As you can see, even the mightiest emperor could not escape the burdens of his ambition. Or could he shield his people from plague, war, and time's relentless passage? Now, as the echoes of imperial grandeur fade into the hush of reflection, we turn to the physical remnants of this era, to the silent stones and unearthed relics that whisper of daily life in Byzantium. Let us now journey beneath the earth, beneath the cobbled streets of modern cities and the forgotten layers of centuries past. Here, in the quiet darkness, lie the remnants of the Byzantine world. Artifacts, frescoes, coins, and bones, each a silent testament to lives once lived in the shadow of empire. In ancient villas and urban neighborhoods, archaeologists have uncovered colorful mosaics, their patterns of birds, vines, and mythological scenes remarkably well preserved beneath centuries of dust and ash. A bronze oil lamp, its handle shaped like a prow of a ship, glass beads, once strung on a necklace that adorned a merchantess wife, or perhaps a workshop owner's daughter. And the Aegean, divers have found the remains of Byzantine ships, some astonishingly well preserved in the oxygen-starved depths. They circulated in markets, were hoarded in crises, or lost and forgotten in the cracks of workshop floors. Each coin is a fragment of an economy, an echo of a transaction long concluded. They speak of artisans and laborers, merchants and monks, children and elders, the rhythm of daily life etched into clay, stone, and pigment. Amphorae filled with wine or olive oil still rest in the silt, their contents long evaporated, but their forms intact. The past sleeps lightly beneath our feet, murmuring its stories to those patient enough to listen. In Cappadocia, for instance, entire underground cities and rock-cut churches lie hidden beneath the arid landscape. Their frescoes faded but legible. Christ Pantocrator gazing down with solemn eyes, saints rendered in ochre and lapis lazuli. These vessels remind us of the bustling maritime trade that connected Byzantium with the wider Mediterranean world. The creak of wood, and the snap of sails carrying cargo from Alexandria to Athens, from Antioch to Venice. A child's toy, carved from bone, worn smooth by little hands. Picture the cool touch of stone beneath your fingertips, the quiet satisfaction of fitting together pieces of a puzzle made by artisans long gone. Imagine yourself standing in the subterranean depths of Constantinople, in the great cisterns that once supplied water to the city. The Basilica cistern, with its forest of stone columns, stands cool and damp, lit softly by filtered light. Water drips from the vaulted ceilings, each drop marking time in this vast man-made cavern. Some columns are carved with intricate designs, others repurposed from even older monuments. To stone Medusa heads, their origins mysterious, sit at the base of two pillars, turned sideways, their gaze forever averted. Here, archaeology, ISNT, just a discipline. It's a descent into the hidden layers of time. Elsewhere in the empire, layers of soil have yielded glimpses of everyday life. Then, there are the small things, the delicate, personal items that bring the past startlingly close. One of the most remarkable discoveries lies in the city of Ephesus, not far from Constantinople, where excavations revealed terraced houses. Homes of the wealthy adorned with frescoed walls, marble floors, and indoor plumbing, a testament to both luxury and urban sophistication in the empire. Walking through these spaces, you can almost hear the faint echo of laughter, the distant strains of a lyre, the murmur of dinner conversations. Even shipwrecks offer their own stories, off the coast of present-day Turkey, in the waters of the Black Sea coins, too. Surface in the soil, stamped with the faces of emperors, their inscriptions declaring piety and power. Perhaps most haunting are the churches and monasteries that still stand, often in ruins but still defiant against time. These archaeological finds allow us to piece together a world that is otherwise known only through fragmentary texts and grandiose histories. And yet, for every treasure uncovered, countless others remain buried, waiting, perhaps forever, beneath the silt, the soil, and the shifting needs of modern cities. With that thought, let us ascend from these buried halls and shadowed corridors to the gilded world of Byzantine high society, the palace, the banquet, and the intrigue that unfolded where power and opulence reigned. Now, let us leave the dusty chambers of the earth and emerge into the brilliance of a Byzantine palace, a world of light, color, and refinement. Imagine yourself stepping into the marbled halls of a noble estate in Constantinople, perhaps during the reign of Emperor Theophilos in the 9th century. The scent of incense drifts through the air, mingling with the aroma of rich stews and honeyed pastries. The palace, built with sweeping courtyards, gleaming mosaics, and columns of polished marble, is a showcase of wealth and taste. Walls are adorned with frescoes of saints and emperors, and the golden glow of candlelight reflects off surfaces designed to impress. The host, perhaps a nobleman close to the imperial court, greets his guests with practiced courtesy, offering not just food, but an experience steeped in ceremony. Everywhere, there is a quiet hum of servants moving briskly yet discreetly, their presence marked only by the soft shuffle of sandaled feet. Bowls of olives glisten with oil, alongside pickled vegetables and nuts. For those with a sweet tooth, there are pastries drenched in honey, resembling the baklava we know today. Delicate and flaky, each bite a small indulgence. Honey-glazed figs and dates from the Levant provide a sweet contrast, their richness balanced by the sharp tang of preserved lemons. The Byzantines prided themselves on their intellectualism, and to dine well was also to converse well. Sometimes a storyteller or rhapsode might recite epic tales of ancient heroes, their voices modulated to suit the rising and falling tension of the narrative, all designed to enchant but not overwhelm. Recitations of Homer or discussions on the nature of the Trinity might be interwoven with commentary on court intrigues or the latest architectural marvel. Grimy workshops to the opulence of the elite. From the raw labor of artisans to the refined rituals of dining and debate, the past is quiet now, and so may your thoughts become. The empire was a tapestry of textures, some coarse and worn, others gilded and intricate. At the heart of this grandeur is the dining hall, or triclinium, a space designed. It's not just for sustenance, but for display of power, erudition, and cultural sophistication. In his time, the empire soared, yet trembled on the edge of ruin. His legacy, both grand and flawed, lives on in stones and stories, whispers from an age-long past. In that space, time seemed slow, marked by the rhythm of the hammer, the scent of heated materials, and the ever-present dust that settled on tired skin. Imagine yourself reclining on a cushioned couch, as was the custom for the elite, though chairs and benches were also common. Each thread chosen with care, and where the delicate balance of power and pleasure played out beneath gilded ceilings. Let the images of artisans at work, emperors in gold, crumbling stones, and flickering candlelight drift gently through your thoughts, like clouds passing across a calm sky. In the remnants of walls, mosaics, and half-buried streets, the echoes of countless lives remain, each brick and marble column a testament to resilience and change. The world of Byzantium grows still, and so may you. The atmosphere is one of warmth and ease, where the boundary between luxury and leisure is carefully curated. Every guest is conscious of alliances, rivalries, and the ever-shifting favor of the emperor. A careless word, an ill-timed jest, or an ambiguous compliment might carry unintended weight. The sounds of hammers and lyres, the murmurs of palace intrigue, the slow crumble of ancient walls. They all fade into a soft hush, like distant waves upon the shore of memory. The Byzantine Empire, like all great civilizations, is both luminous and shadowed, filled with the mundane and the magnificent. And so the noble diners navigate their conversations with the same delicacy as they do the elaborate meal before them. The table before you is low and wide, laden with an array of dishes that reflect the empire's cosmopolitan reach. The corridors once again grow quiet, the echoes of music and laughter fading into the night. The first course might include fresh bread, round and crusty, served with a spread of cheeses, soft ones flavored with herbs and harder aged varieties. The wine is sometimes spiced with cloves, cinnamon, or pepper, infusing each sip with warmth and fragrance. Wine flows freely, though always diluted with water, in accordance with custom. Drinking it neat was considered a barbarian practice, and fish caught from the Bosphorus, served with sauces of fermented fish and vinegar. The famed garum of earlier Roman times, still present in Byzantine cooking. The main courses reflect the empire's bounty. Roasted lamb seasoned with garlic and rosemary, savory stews of chickpeas and lentils. A signature dish might be pastillos, a pie filled with layers of minced meat, nuts, and spices, its flavors both hearty and exotic. As the meal progresses, the conversation drifts effortlessly between subjects: politics, philosophy, theology, and literature. Entertainment accompanies the feast. A lyrist plucks gentle melodies, or a group of dancers performs slow, ritualized movements. The lighting is soft, golden from the oil lamps and candles made of beeswax, their flickering flames casting gentle shadows that dance across the mosaic floors and frescoed walls. Yet beneath the elegance, there is always a murmur of politics. The evening draws on, and as the final cups of wine are poured and the last crumbs of pastry consumed, guests begin to withdraw. Stepping back from the palace, one can reflect on the contrasts of Byzantine society. From the bustling and now, as the lights of the palace dim, so too may your mind begin to soften. To wander through these imagined halls, perhaps pausing to admire a mosaic or listen for the distant strains of a lyre. And so, as our quiet journey through the Byzantine world draws to a close, let us step back once more, taking in the breadth of what we have gently explored together. We began in the dim, warm confines of a Byzantine workshop, where artisans hunched over their tools, day after day, shaping clay, hammering metals, and weaving intricate patterns into cloth. From there, we followed the path of Emperor Justinian, his rise, his ambition, his sweeping reforms, and the monumental edifices left in his wake. We then wandered through the layered ruins of Constantinople, that eternal city where one empire stood upon the bones of another and yet another after that. And finally, we reclined in the halls of Byzantine nobility, where the world smelled of incense and spiced wine, where conversations unfolded like fine embroidery. Together, these glimpses form a tapestry of contrasts: toil and grandeur, ruin and beauty, hardship and indulgence. And now, as we close this chapter of exploration, allow yourself to rest in the gentle knowledge that the past, with all its complexities, is safely behind us. You may feel the weight of centuries settling lightly around you, as comforting as a well-worn cloak. There is no need to hold on to any of it. Simply let the stories rest where they are, knowing that history, in all its quiet vastness, will wait patiently until you wish to return again. For now, may your breath slow, your mind ease, and your body sink deeper into comfort. Good night, and sleep well.